It was the end of an era when Deathly Hallows Part 2 wrapped up Harry Potter's epic saga, and as much as we were all weeping like moaning Myrtle by the end, you have to remember, we were just the audience. Can you imagine what it was like for these amazing cast and crew who had spent most of their young adult lives inhabiting these characters and suddenly having to stop? What was it like at the very end of shooting for our favorite Wizarding World franchise? Let's find out right now. Saying bye is hard. Like, are you ever at a friend's house and just find yourself hanging out in the doorway after already saying goodbye because you're just having a blast? Or if you're like me and are just a floating voice on the internet and don't have any friends, have you ever been watching a TV show or a film franchise and decide to hold off on watching the ending because you're not quite ready to say goodbye to these characters that you've fallen in love with? Yeah, now multiply that by 394, and that's probably what the cast of the Harry Potter franchise felt as filming wrapped up on Deathly Hallows Part 2. I mean, it was a franchise that most of the actors legitimately became adults during the 10 years or so it took to film all the movies. The bonds and relationships they formed were stronger than Phoenix tears, so you can imagine what an emotional time it was for everyone. How do you soften the blow with something like that? Well, first off, how about an ice cream party? You might have heard that Ron actor Rupert Grint owns an ice cream truck, which, come on, is totally a Ron thing to do, right? Man, the casting for these parts were perfect. Anyways, as a way to cheer everyone up, Grint brought over his ice cream truck on the very last day and helped serve the hardworking cast and crew. The funny thing about that, though, is that Rupert has said he hadn't quite mastered the technique of working the truck yet at that point and ended up just absolutely covered in ice cream. Again, classic Ron move, don't you think? But on a personal level, how did it exactly feel for these actors? Well, due to everyone shooting different scenes, everyone was done at different times, and they all processed the monumental event a little differently. One of the sweetest goodbyes had to be between Matthew Lewis and Alan Rickman, who played Neville Longbottom and Severus Snape, respectively. As we all know, throughout the franchise, it was revealed that Neville feared Snape the most out of anyone, as evidenced hilariously in Prisoner of Azkaban when Neville faced the boggart and it turned into Snape, which then turned into Snape wearing Neville's grandmother's clothes. Anyway, the performance was convincing because Lewis had actually been very intimidated by Rickman in real life too. I mean, who wouldn't be? He's Alan Rickman. And on Rickman's last day of filming, Lewis went to Rickman's trailer just to say goodbye and thank him for all of his guidance and his general professional demeanor over the last 10 years of shooting. And you know what happened? Did Rickman say thanks and shut the door? Of course not. Rickman invited Lewis in for a cup of tea. Man, could you be any more British? And the two had a conversation about what Lewis wanted his career to be in the future, with the veteran actor giving his own advice. I'm not crying, you're crying. And this kind of emotional goodbye was prevalent everywhere, all the way from the cast members to the producers. Before I get to how the main actors felt about saying goodbye, I think it's important to mention film producer David Heyman, who helped produce all the movies in the franchise. Heyman remembers the very last day of shooting, which was the infamous epilogue that saw the main characters 19 years later sending their own kids off to Hogwarts. Sure, it's easy to make fun of the less than stellar prosthetics, but let's look past that and find the beating heart of this scene, which is everyone saying goodbye. Heyman remembers just how absolutely surreal the whole experience was, as he was around back when these three main leads, meaning Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint, were all just around 11 years old at the time they were cast. And now Heyman, who made it a point to visit on the last day, was around to see these actors aged up to look in their 30s and saying goodbye. It was a very emotional time. Knowing that, I guess I can forgive the prosthetics. And the main trio themselves had to be going through a lot as well. As Emma Watson put it, it was like saying goodbye to a sister. Playing the same part for so long, it basically becomes a part of you, and it affects you in ways you might not expect.
Put your trousers back on, Radcliffe.
For example, as Daniel Radcliffe puts it, Rupert Grint wasn't much of a crier over the years. Radcliffe said he never saw the Ron actor shed any tears throughout the whole franchise. But as the shoot was winding down and they were shooting their final scenes, Radcliffe noticed Grint in tears as the end approached, and this ended up making Radcliffe cry even more. There's something about seeing usually stoic individuals break down that's just super heart-wrenching, isn't there? On that note, I should mention it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies near the very end of shooting Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. I mean, there were some upsides to it. For example, do you know how much work has to go into getting into character for some of these actors? I mean, sure, it's easier for some than for others. I mean, Radcliffe just needs someone with a pencil to draw a scar on his forehead, right? And to have someone put in the contacts for his green eyes. Oh wait, no, he doesn't have green eyes in the movie, even though people tell him all the time he has his mother's eyes for some reason.
You have your mother's eyes.
I'm not upset about that. Anyways, one actor who actually had it pretty rough was Robbie Coltrane, who played the lovable and bad at keeping secrets Hagrid. If you don't recall, Hagrid was kind of a hairy guy, which meant a lot of work had to be put into Coltrane's makeup every day. And then after shooting, people had to come to his trailer to rub his face with hot oil in order to get all the beard glue off. Can you imagine doing that for 10 years? So it was kind of a relief for him to be done. But then, of course, he also felt the weight of saying goodbye. He's quoted saying how the adults started filming the final movie, saying it was going to be tough on the kids, but as things got closer, it was getting to be tough on the adults as well. Other actors had interesting final experiences as well, and maybe not in a positive way. Tom Felton, who played Draco Malfoy, found his goodbye slightly anticlimactic. On his last day, Felton admitted that he was expecting a bigger deal in terms of an emotional breakdown after he was done with his final scene. But all that happened was the first assistant director got out the microphone and read out all the names of people whose last day it was, which led to a forced round of applause from the rest of the crew, and then everyone walked away. And that was it. And Felton now says that the lackluster goodbye also came from the fact that he felt he wasn't quite done with the character. There was still some unfinished business, according to him, which sounds like total code for, yes, I definitely want to get back together sometime in the future to make a film adaptation of The Cursed Child, right? I mean, you have to wonder if that's something these actors would want to do, or if they're satisfied with where they left things. Like, could you see the main trio of Radcliffe, Watson, and Grint all wanting to reprise their roles in another few years or so for another movie? All of them seem happy enough with where their careers have gone, and they wouldn't necessarily be chomping at the bit to come back. Maybe if Grint wants to buy a second ice cream truck, he would do it. But on that note, as sad and emotional as these goodbyes were, is it better to let things be?
Am I really gonna defile this grave for money? Of course I am!
Yes, it was probably devastating to say goodbye, but do you risk trying to get the gang back together for another movie? That's why goodbyes are bittersweet. They're tough, but they provide a sense of finality to things. Overall, it's understandable why everyone felt the way they did as filming wrapped. It must have been an absolutely incredible journey for everyone, and it was such a nice conclusion for almost every character that I'm sure a mountain of tears were shed. They truly became a family over the course of 10 years, and even though they may not keep in touch as much anymore, they'll always have the bonds they made. And we'll remember how we felt saying goodbye when we watched the movie. Always. I know this was a sad time for all of us when Harry Potter's journey ended, but hey, at least we got the Fantastic Beasts franchise to scratch that magical itch, right? Well, okay, I don't think you'll find anyone who says they prefer this new franchise over the old one, but at least this new franchise has, I don't know, cute animals sometimes? Never mind, I'll just rewatch Harry Potter.